Empires fell, scrolls burned. But the truth survived, hidden, waiting. Now, through time itself, we uncover what history tried to erase. Truth through time. Faith, history, secrets the world forgot. Imagine an empire so powerful its rulers believed they were gods. Now imagine that same empire bowing to the faith of a crucified criminal. How did that happen? And why did one emperor, Galerius, try to stop it with fire, blood, and fear? The transformation of Christianity from hunted cult to imperial religion is one of the most astonishing turns in history. Welcome to Part 4 of our documentary series, How Christianity Survived the Roman Empire. In our previous episode, we followed the fire and faith that fueled Christianity during the years of brutal Roman persecution. We saw how martyrdom and underground worship only made the Christian movement more resilient. Today, we trace one of the most dramatic historical reversals the world has ever seen. How did a marginalized, outlawed sect of Jesus followers rise from the ashes of persecution to stand in the palaces of emperors? This is the story of conversion, of the empire, of its rulers, and of history itself. When Diocletian became emperor in 284 AD, he brought order to a fractured empire. He divided the vast Roman Empire into a tetrarchy, rule by four, appointing trusted military leaders as Caesars under himself and his co-emperor Maximian. Among them was Galerius, a soldier from humble origins in the Balkan provinces. But behind Diocletian's reform stood a man more ruthless, more zealous, Galerius, who ruled the eastern provinces with an iron fist. Where Diocletian sought stability, Galerius sought purity. He believed Rome could only be restored by purging it of dangerous influences. Galerius saw Christianity not just as a religious alternative but as an existential threat to Rome's power. Where Diocletian hesitated, Galerius urged aggression. According to Lactantius, an early Christian author and advisor to Constantine, Galerius was the mind behind the great persecution of Christians. In his book on the deaths of the persecutors, he writes, Galerius, being by nature savage and barbarous, incited Diocletian to persecute the Christians. Galerius believed Christian refusal to sacrifice to Roman gods was a form of treason. In a society where the emperor was often deified, Christianity was political blasphemy. Was it really about religion, or was Galerius afraid of something deeper? A loyalty he couldn't command, a unity he couldn't shatter, and a God he couldn't kill? Christianity posed three threats to imperial Rome. Loyalty, Christians refused to honor the emperor as a god. Unity, their tight-knit underground communities seemed immune to imperial control. Identity, Christianity worshipped one true God, undermining Rome's polytheistic identity. Historian W.H.CFrend notes in Martyrdom and Persecution in the early church that Galerius viewed Christian devotion as ideological rebellion, a direct challenge to the very soul of Roman statecraft. Even before the official edicts, Galerius began targeting Christians in the East, removing them from military posts and government offices. To him, their faith was incompatible with duty to Rome. His fear wasn't just of sedition. It was of something worse, irrelevance. A world where Rome's gods no longer commanded fear. A world where one crucified man overshadowed Caesar. In 303 AD, under Galerius' pressure, Diocletian launched the Great Persecution. Churches were burned. Scriptures were destroyed. Christian leaders were arrested and executed. In church history, Eusebius recounts horrific scenes: bishops flayed alive, Christian women thrown to wild beasts, children forced to choose between their faith and their families. Galerius didn't want compromise. He wanted eradication. Roman authorities offered Christians one chance: offer incense to the emperor's image or die. The violence was strategic. It was designed to terrorize. Imperial edicts were posted publicly, and brutal punishments were carried out in amphitheaters for all to see. The message was clear: Christianity would not be tolerated. Historian Timothy D. Barnes, in Constantine and Eusebius, emphasizes that the goal was to systematically erase Christian identity through institutional destruction and psychological warfare. As churches became battlegrounds, the faith went underground. What Galerius couldn't see, what he would never understand, was that the very force he unleashed would become the fuel of Christianity's rise. The church didn't crumble. It adapted. Christians hid scriptures in caves. They worshipped in cemeteries by candlelight. Underground networks smuggled food to prisoners and cared for the martyrs' families. The persecution forged legends, like Saint Agnes, a teenage girl who chose death over denying Christ, or Saint Felix, who buried martyrs under threat of execution. Rodney Stark, in The Rise of Christianity, argues, far from being extinguished, Christianity was romanticized by suffering. The faith became visible, courageous, and irresistible. Persecution gave Christians a cause larger than themselves. Their willingness to suffer became a testament to the strength of their beliefs. Roman citizens began to ask, what kind of God inspires such loyalty? Christian communities expanded even during repression. Converts joined, not out of fear or force, but from witnessing compassion in action. The Church offered something Rome never could: hope. Historian Elizabeth Castelli, in Martyrdom and Memory, explains how stories of suffering were preserved and retold to shape Christian identity, weaving pain into purpose and trauma into theology. These stories were not just tales, they were blueprints. Each martyrdom became a monument of faith etched into memory, fueling a spiritual movement that no fire could consume. Then something shocking happened. As the church grew stronger, Galerius' own body began to betray him. He developed a painful and grotesque disease, likely gangrene, that caused his flesh to rot while he still lived. The wounds bred worms. No healing prayer to Roman gods worked. Lactantius describes this in disturbing detail. A foul ulcer broke out in the lower parts of Galerius' body, corroding the flesh and breeding worms. It was a living death. Physicians could not help him. Pagan sacrifices brought no relief. As his body decayed, so did his grip on power. Provinces rebelled. The empire splintered. Historian Guillaume de Saint Croix, in Christian Persecution, Martyrdom, and Orthodoxy, sees Galerius' end as emblematic, a body politic and personal literally rotting from within. He was isolated, physically and politically. And in that solitude, he was forced to confront the force he had tried to destroy. He ordered their deaths. Now, on his deathbed, he pleaded for their prayers. But was it too late for Galerius and for Rome? In 311 AD, only days before his death, Galerius issued an Edict of Toleration for Christianity. Not only did he stop the persecution, he begged Christians to pray for him. Let them pray to their God for our recovery, that the state may be preserved in peace. The man who tried to destroy the church now asked it for mercy. There's no record of baptism. Most historians believe his reversal was desperation, not devotion. But even so, it marked a turning point in Roman Christian relations. David Bentley Hart notes, Galerius' plea was not only political. It was a moment of existential surrender. He had failed to destroy the church, and he knew it. And the church did pray, for him and for Rome, because their faith was never about vengeance. It was about redemption. The death of Galerius in 311 AD did not immediately end the persecution across the empire. In some parts, his Edict of Toleration was ignored or resisted. Maximinus Daia, Galerius' successor in the East, briefly reinstated measures against Christians. However, the tide had already turned. The church, once underground and fragmented, had emerged stronger and more connected than ever before. Its leaders began to openly organize, correspond, and advocate for believers across provinces. Bishops met in councils. Communities built new churches, this time not in secret, but with public support. The psychological effect of Galerius' reversal cannot be overstated. For believers, it confirmed divine justice. For Roman citizens, it challenged traditional views of power and divinity. If the gods of Rome could not heal an emperor, but the prayers of Christians were requested by him, what did that mean? Historian Peter Brown, in The Rise of Western Christendom, argues that this moment signified a deepening cultural shift, from civic religion to personal faith, from ritual obligation to spiritual conviction. The center of gravity was moving, and the church was becoming not just a refuge for the oppressed, but a new source of moral authority. In the years following Galerius' death, Constantine would rise and eventually issue the Edict of Milan in 313 AD, granting full religious freedom across the empire. But that story, of Constantine's vision of a cross in the sky and the baptism of an empire, awaits in our next chapter. This was only the beginning of the empire's transformation. What happened after Galerius would change history forever. Subscribe and tap the bell icon to walk with us through powerful stories of faith and history. Thumbs up like if this episode touched you. Speech balloon comment to share your thoughts or reflections in comment section.